Hi folks, it's Diesel Johnny Boy here. Something a little bit different from the engines and machinery I do. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about tortoises, yep, the good old tortoise. Now this video concerns only like the European tortoises living in the United Kingdom, so people that keep tropical tortoises, this is not really relevant. But over the years, tortoise has been a very popular pet in Europe, and unfortunately we've depleted the wild populations to a pretty significant extent now, that a lot of tortoises in the Mediterranean countries are just quite a rare species now, and you will not find them in the numbers that they used to occur like pre-Second World War. There are obviously a lot more tortoises probably in countries like Turkey and Greece and the Mediterranean countries, because obviously first of all we pillaged the European countries, and then we moved over to North Africa and Turkey and basically stole the tortoises out of the wild and brought them to great numbers into England and excuse me, other parts of Europe where they were popular pets, and most of the poor things weren't looked after properly and died. But there are quite a lot of tortoises still around, and people captive breed them now. And the tortoise is a lovely animal. I've had tortoises for years. I started keeping them when I was about 12 years old. But I don't really advocate pet keeping, of reptile pet keeping particularly. I mean, I grew out of it. I decided that I just couldn't replicate wild habitats in aquariums and vivariums. I mean, I know a lot of people do their best, but it's very difficult to do, near impossible. Tortoises can have a bit of a better life because they can live outdoors in reptileries or in enclosures in your garden, so they can have a bit more room, so they do have a better quality of life, although British summers do not anywhere replicate Mediterranean summers. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough. I haven't got the virus, so I hope not anyway. But anyway, it's March time and tortoises have been in hibernation, and it's time for them to come out now, really. I mean, Mediterranean tortoises would normally hibernate in their own countries, so Greece and Turkey and those lovely warm countries. They'd only have a much shorter hibernation. So in the UK, we have to kind of artificially extend the summer and then bring the spring forward, really, if you want the tortoises to thrive. Otherwise they'll be stuck in hibernation for probably more than 6 months of the year. So my tortoises normally go down in October. So when the weather gets a bit miserable towards the end of the summer into the autumn, I normally put them in the vivarium and fatten them up a bit more, and then have a bit of extension extend the summer a little bit longer. And then they go into hibernation in about October, middle of October. Then I get them out late February, early March. So that would give them about 4 months, 4 months hibernation, which is about right. That's what you'd expect maybe in countries like the south of France, which is probably the northern limit of the Mediterranean tortoises. Obviously they're quite a hardy animal. I mean, the Horsfield's tortoise is probably the hardiest one, and that can take quite extreme cold and hot conditions. But the tortoises we're generally talking about are the Hermann's tortoise, the spur-thighed tortoise, maybe the Horsfield's tortoise. They seem to be getting more popular now. If you're really, really, really lucky, you might even have a marginated tortoise, and that's pretty rare. I've only seen a very few of those. And that's a tortoise that just lives in Greece. They are pretty rare, and that's the biggest. That is the biggest tortoise in Europe, but they are pretty rare. I don't often see those in the UK unless someone's managed to captive breed marginated tortoises. So what I normally do is I bring the tortoises out of hibernation, like I say, late February, early March, regardless of the weather. I mean, hopefully it's warming up a bit by then in southern England, which is where I live. And we bathe them. I'll just show you quickly what I do. I bathed them in a little tray. We put them in a little tray like that, so I should have brought that in, with some lukewarm water, so that's not too hot, I don't burn them. You put them in there for like 10 minutes or so. Shut the door. I'm afraid that this is a real-time video. I don't know how to edit things, so you'll have to put up with it. So we put them in there for a little bit. That's like a cat litter tray, actually. Some warm water. Let them sit in there for a little bit. Then dry them off with your old towel. I've even got a tortoise towel. Look at that. In a charity shop. And then you've got your vivarium here. I'd have preheated the vivarium. Now this vivarium was obviously, it's far too small to keep tortoises in. I wouldn't advocate keeping a tortoise in a vivarium. Right? This is probably like 2'6" by about 2 foot. But this is all right for like a just to help them come out of hibernation. It's ideal. As they get warmer, they're going to get really angry. They start thundering around in there, getting pretty pissed off. Excuse my language. But they get pretty angry, tortoises. They like a lot of freedom and wandering around. So what we do is this vivarium. Actually, this is just a quick thing about vivariums. There's all sorts of vivariums on the market. You can get these tortoise tables which are open at the top, which are fine, but you need those in a room that's fairly warm, because obviously heat or lose will rapidly go out of those. You can't really control the temperature in an open topped box, which is what they are. This vivarium I made out of an old food cabinet. It's double glazed glass actually. It's pretty high tech, and it's like stainless steel. All I did was put plywood on the top and on the back, and I put slidey glass doors on it. To keep this one warm, we've got a ceramic bulb there. I did have this cheap with a heater, but it didn't seem to get it warm enough, so that's an 80-watt ceramic heater. Then we've got a spot bulb there to give them a little basking area. So that gives them like a spot of heat. This gets like, you need that area to get like 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Over 30 degrees in that little area there. They need a lot of warmth, because tortoises are sun worshipping animals, and they love that heat because obviously they're cold-blooded. The heat's controlled by the thermostat up here. These are pretty easy to install, so that just controls the heat. There's like a little place for them to go if they get a bit fed up of the sun. They can go in there. I've got a little shallow bowl of water there out of an old terracotta plant saucer, which you can pick up quite cheap. Tortoises are a rather ruffian of an animal, so if you put anything that's lightweight, they'll just tip it over. So that's terracotta. I mean, once they warm up, they charge around like little bulldozers, so you've got to like put things in that will withstand them pushing and shoving. Anyway, so that's what's going on in there. So those tortoises will be in there until the weather warms up a little bit, then they can go out in the tortoise enclosure in the garden. So obviously bathe them. You might have to bathe them a couple of times every day for a few days, just to help get their bowels moving again and just get them back up to speed again. Bathe their eyes, make sure their eyes aren't stuck together and what have you. And then they should be fine. They'll start warming up, and mine normally start eating after 2 or 3 days after they start eating a bit of watercress, or mine, to be honest, mine like a bit of banana. I know that's not really the best thing to give them, but they seem to be all right. Now this tortoise here, I'll just show you this little tortoise here. Well, he's not so little anymore. This tortoise here, this tortoise is called Nelson. Now this tortoise here has only got one eye. And I actually hatched this tortoise out myself. I helped get him out of his shell when I was 14 years old, and I'm 51 now. I'm 52 this year. So Nelson he's a Herman's tortoise. And I had some eggs from I had a few other tortoises in the old days when I was young. I had a lot of tortoises actually at one point. And they laid quite a lot of eggs, so I did hatch quite a few tortoises out, and Sadly, over the years, some have died because I didn't look after them properly. Not out of neglect, but out of ignorance, really. So I've tried to educate myself. It's got a bit of a bumpy shell. I think that's a bit of a deficiency, with maybe lack of sunlight. But Nelson he's obviously over 35 years old now, and he was the runt of the litter, old Nelson, with his one eye. I couldn't believe it when he came out of the shell with only one eye. His face is slightly deformed on that side. Let's see if we can see. I think it's a bit difficult to see. See, he's got absolutely no eye there whatsoever. But Nelson's a very friendly little tortoise. I love old Nelson. So he's been with me for over 35 years, as has this little chap here. And I think that this is a Horsfield's tortoise. But I'm not 100% sure, because it's got the clawed tail on the end of the tail. But maybe there's a tortoise expert out there that can tell me. It's got the supracaudal dividing line on it. It's got the nuchal there. But yeah, he's never grown. I mean, I had this tortoise probably over 35 years now. It's never grown at all. God knows how old he is. I mean, he was that size 35 years ago, so I don't know. He says he's from Kazakhstan, but I don't know if he's telling the truth. He's learnt English a bit better. But anyway, look, there's my setup anyway, so you can see we've got the ceramic bulb, we've got a thermometer here, the temperature's going up a bit. It's a good idea to have a thermometer. We're up to 25, but I've opened the door. Got a little enclosure in there for them to hide away in. That's it. Ventilation, need a bit of ventilation. A bit of free flowing air in there. Mine's in the garage, so it's a bit chilly in here, so I've got to keep that down. It's got these are really good, by the way. These Habistat thermostats are really good. It tells you this is a new one. It tells you when the heat's on, power, heat, and you can adjust it on here. There's a probe. There's the probe here. That senses the temperature, so it'll switch the stat on and off to keep the temperature. I turn it down slightly at night time, so they get about 20 degrees at night, and then it goes up in the day. Obviously, this is just a temporary setup. I must make that clear. These tortoises will not be in here all year round, because that would be cruel. It's far too small. They will go out into the garden, into a nice enclosure where they can roam about. Just a quick thing about keeping your tortoises outside. You need a decent little box for them to go in. My tortoises, I don't know, they don't much have a brain, but you can habituate them to go into a box at night, and my two are pretty good at doing that. They like to go in at night time. So I've recently created them a new one. I've had a couple of ideas. So this is just made out of plywood. It's 1 inch ply. To be honest, it is a piece of ply found at the local dump. Some bloke was chucking it out, and I said, oh, I'll have that, and he gave me this sheet of ply, so I've cut it down to create this. You can see it's just like a slight slopey roof with a piece of galvanised tin that I painted black because my wife moaned about the colour of it being silver. So it's got a little entrance here. But what I did is I put like this piece of plastic. Might be a bit like a little curtain, might be a bit stupid, but that's just stop any draft, well, limit the drafts a bit. The tortoises just push their way and it'll flap back down again. Inside, I've had an idea. So this roof just comes off like that, a couple of grooves, it sits in there. I had this idea maybe, I don't know if you can see that. These are them sort of quite a new thing really. Well, I've been around for years, but I kind of moved away from the reptile business trades type thing, so I didn't really know what was going on in the reptile world. So, but these little plastic heat mats, I know they've probably been around for ages, but I thought that's a 20-watt one. I thought, should I put that in a tortoise house? A bit like having an electric blanket in your bed. So I'm doing a bit of an experiment here. So the tortoises can have, it's only less than half, so you've got that side's unheated and that side's got like the little heat pad. It might help the tortoises sort of warm up in the morning time when it's a bit chilly in the mornings in Britain. Even in the summertime, it's not always the weather's not always that nice, is it? So that'll give them a little bit of warmth, get them ahead of the game and get them up to speed. When they come out, they won't be like completely stone cold. So yeah, that's it really. That's the little tortoise house. You put that out in the tortoise enclosure and they go in and out of there. Mine are pretty good. You can habituate them and they will use it. But I think that's about it really. I'm not going to go into the food of tortoises because, like, hopefully most people that be watching this know the kind of food that tortoises eat. But it's the key points are: get them out of hibernation, keep them warm, don't go putting them out in the garden too soon. You've got to get them eating. These will be in here for quite a while now because it's early March and it's getting a little bit spring-like, but it's nowhere near spring-like in Turkey, for instance. You've got to imagine these animals come from the Mediterranean. They're hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles outside their geographical range. So you dump them out in the garden, they're just going to sit there and get a cold and get ill. I know some tortoises do naturally hibernate in Britain, and people have told me, yeah, my tortoise just goes in the garden and it crawls into the compost heap and then it comes out in April or whatever. That is, yeah, I know that happens. I've had a tortoise escape from my tortoise enclosure when I was very young, and then about 5 years later my dad found it in a local woodland when he was going for a walk. So this tortoise had been living out in the wild for like years and just going through the natural motions, but that's more exceptional than likely to happen. So if you want to keep your tortoises healthy and give them a long life, just imagine what you're trying to recreate is the Mediterranean climate. So you need your tortoise enclosure outside to catch the early morning sun and to be in full sun for much of the day, and then give them somewhere shady to get out of the sun because obviously they don't want to overheat as well. So there we go, that's about it. I hope that's proved interesting for some people, and it'd be good to have some comments on anyone else's experiences with tortoises and that sort of thing. Anyway, great. Over and out. Catch you next time.